Breakups are brutal, to say the least. They can feel shattering, like something inside you has been cracked open. People often say that time heals all wounds, and while time does soften things, healing isn't passive. The real transformation comes from what you do with your pain. What do you learn about yourself? How do you grow? How do you rebuild confidence and clarity? Answering those questions is what guides you toward healing after a breakup. And it's not instant. It's a process that takes time, patience, and compassion for yourself. So today we're going to look at which couples actually grew, or I should say which individuals actually grew after their breakup, and which ones are still repeating the same patterns, and why that matters for all of us. Hi, I'm Dr. Pam, therapist and relationship counselor. Welcome to my channel. I am so glad you're here. Thank you so much for your thoughtful comments and for being part of this growing community. And if you're new here, welcome. I am passionate about helping you grow, both in your relationships and personally. And if that is something that you'd like more of, I'd love for you to subscribe so that we can keep growing together. Also, I know that Love is Blind is a heavily edited show, and I don't know any of these individuals personally, and I am not diagnosing anyone. I am simply commenting on what we're shown so that you and I can explore relationship patterns, communication, and emotional dynamics. My goal is never to judge anyone, but to offer insights that can help you better understand yourself and your relationships. Let's start with Kacie and Patrick.
Just to see it was like, it was cool, but not cool, you know, but it was
I
cool.
don't think it
For the
was
most part.
cool. I mean, it broke my heart seeing it. I mean, all I wanted to do was protect you. And I did. Like, I was trying to explain that maybe in this high pressure, again, timeline, that I don't know if my attraction can grow to get to the aisle.
Sometimes we tell ourselves a story that is based on how we see ourselves, but that may not be aligned with how others see you and experience you. And that is exactly what I see with Kacie. When she said it wasn't cool and it broke my heart, I initially thought, oh, good, she recognizes how her actions hurt Patrick. But she erased all of it with her next sentence. I was trying to protect you. That comment came from Kacie's intention to not hurt Patrick, but her actions were so hurtful. And when she tells herself that what she did was protecting him, she dismisses the actual impact of how she handled everything. Patrick walked away believing she loved him and that they would see each other after the show. That isn't protection, that's giving false hope. Real protection would have sounded like, Patrick, I should not have come on this show. I wasn't ready to be in a relationship, and that's on me. And I know that I am hurting you by having to leave the show and you, and for that I am deeply sorry, and you do not deserve to be hurt. I do hope that you find someone who deserves you. She may not have had those words in the moment when she left the show. Most people don't. But she could have had them now. So when she leads with, I was trying to protect you, it can feel like salt in the wound because it dismisses the reality of what Patrick went through. So next comes the answer to the question everybody's been waiting for. Why did Kacie keep the ring? She finally opens up about it. Let's watch.
He told me I could keep it when we met up in the hotel lobby. Then we got back to Denver.
I said you could keep it because I thought we were going to go back to Denver and try.
I thought we were too.
And then when we got back to Denver, we didn't try, or I felt like you didn't put enough effort in.
It's good to see Patrick express how he experienced everything with Kacie. He's challenging her version of the events, and whether that's new growth for him or simply he's always been that way, I don't know, but he is advocating for his own experience. Here's the real issue. Kacie told the interviewer she didn't believe her attraction to Patrick would grow.
How you feeling?
I just unfortunately don't think like my attraction to him is
to grow that much. Don't think I could get there with him. Like, period.
But she never told him that. Not that she needed to go that far to tell him that she wasn't attracted to him. However, it would have been better for her to take ownership, like I just suggested.
Can't. Like, I love you so much and I feel...
Good.
Instead, she told Patrick she loved him, that it had nothing to do with him, and that she would see him after the show. From his perspective, those words were hopeful and reassuring. I understand what she's telling herself now that she was protecting him. She believes that by not going to Mexico, she was sparing him from a heartbreak she assumed was inevitable. But that intention doesn't align with her actual behavior. If she truly wanted to protect him, honesty with accountability and compassion would have been the protection. Her blind spot is big here. The story she tells herself about her intentions does not match the impact her actions had on Patrick. And when someone tells you a story that contradicts what you experienced with them, it can feel invalidating and even more hurtful. This isn't just a case of different perspectives, which is normal in relationships. This is about a lack of self-awareness and a lack of accountability for how she handled things. And that's why Patrick's hurt is so understandable.
Your moment to just like say, hey, I'm sorry for how I handled it. I'm sorry for like whatever damage you've done, and we could just wipe this clean and we'll just walk away in peace. And I don't need the ring back. It's just, this is your perfect platform to just apologize, and I would totally accept it. I loved you in the pods.
Even though I was a distant second, but yeah.
It's always tricky to ask someone for an apology. Even if they give one, you're left wondering whether it's sincere. In Patrick's case, I think he would be better off leaving that entirely up to Kacie. Because if an apology comes naturally and unprompted, you know it's genuine. What's jarring, though, is Kacie's response that she was his distant second in the pods. The problem is that she wasn't attracted to him to begin with, so this feels less like a response because she was hurt and more like a defensive tactic. When people feel exposed or confronted, they often reach for something that shifts the discomfort away from themselves, and that seems to be what she did here. What's interesting is that Patrick isn't asking for an apology for his sake. He is actually asking for hers. He sees how hard social media has been on her and believes that if she were to own her actions, it might help her grow and move forward and not be attacked on social media. But again, unless an apology is completely genuine and grounded in self-awareness, it won't have the impact that you hope it will have for her. And then Kacie makes things worse for herself by coming at him again. It keeps her in the same defensive posture rather than allowing for real accountability or resolution.
You care about tearing me up on the internet because you sent me a direct TikTok and then you deleted a TikTok that said I was the side chick.
That's a joke, right?
But it's not
Clearly
funny.
it's a joke.
When people are sending me go kill yourself, it's not funny to send me, actually you were the side chick.
When someone struggles to take accountability, one position that they may slip into is that of the injured party, and that's what Kacie is doing here. While it is absolutely horrific that people are sending her messages telling her to harm herself, none of that was caused or encouraged by Patrick. Bringing that up to him is not only unfair, it shifts the focus away from her actions and places him in a position he doesn't belong in. Kacie's growth work is learning to tell the truth about her own intentions, acknowledge the impact of her actions, and stay with the discomfort of accountability without shifting into defensiveness or self-protection. And for Patrick, he shared on the show that women did not find him attractive based on his ethnicity. I can only hope that he finds someone who loves him in every sense of the word for who he is. So his growth work is to find healing regarding his experiences that led him to feel that way, and to truly see his value in what he brings to another person in a relationship. So next, let's move on to Joe and Madison and well, Kacie and Joe, who dated for a month and a half after the show, and Madison clearly has something to say about that. Let's watch.
I actually think that whatever their connection was affected my engagement. The night of wedding dress and tux fittings, we had all gone out. I'm standing there with a wedding ring on, telling your groomsmen how much I love you, that I'm excited about this. I look over, Kacie has 2 paws on Joe's chest. In your words that night, you said, Kacie was giving me googly eyes. And then the next night, we break up.
Okay, first, it's interesting that Madison refers to the engagement as her engagement rather than their engagement. That small choice of language already tells us a lot about how she experiences the relationship as something that belongs to her rather than something shared. That being said, if she truly believes Joe ended the engagement because he was interested in Kacie, I am sure that hurt deeply. But in a painful way, she may have been spared even greater heartbreak had they moved forward with the marriage. The truth is, someone who can be pulled away that easily isn't a solid partner to build a life with. For Madison to genuinely walk away from this breakup with growth, she will need to look inward rather than framing everything around Kacie. Telling herself that the engagement ended because another woman showed interest may feel protective of herself in the moment, but it keeps her from examining the real dynamics in her relationship with Joe. She's not leaning into growth by holding on to that story. Growth often begins in uncomfortable places. So let's see where she goes from here.
Why was I not privy to that? Like, I'm out here getting my wedding dress. You just had a breakdown. I just watched it.
Yeah.
And you let me go out to the bar with your friends and tell them I love him, I want to marry him. You stood there and you watched me do this, knowing full well what happened at Tux Fitting. Why?
We had that conversation later. I was hanging out with my friends. I wanted to have a good time with my friends and not think about the conversation we were just about to have later that night.
And Joe's growth work is to consider how his actions impact others. He knew he was going to end things with Madison, yet he still chose to go out and have fun that night with her and his friends. What he didn't acknowledge was how painful it was for Madison to be celebrating their relationship while he internally knew he would be ending it soon. In that moment, he was very self-focused. A more accountable response and meaningful step in his growth would have sounded like, yes, I put my anxiety first and I didn't consider how that night would feel for you. Looking back, that was inconsiderate. I regret that choice and I am truly sorry for hurting you in that way. So next, Madison shares that the two of them met up after the show and started making out in the parking lot. And this is how they processed that encounter.
Those feelings are still fresh. I think, probably shouldn't have started making out.
What?
You do it to yourself.
I do it to myself.
What was that? Because for me, that was very confusing. Like, it's
No,
like,
I mean, it was
like
confusing
we're
to
off.
me and walking you back to your car. And I mean, those emotions are still there.
It's interesting that Joe's friends say he does it to himself because this moment with Madison reflects that pattern. The breakup had already happened, yet Joe allowed himself to get swept back into the emotion of the moment. That's very human. Breakups are disorienting, but again, he wasn't considering how his actions might impact Madison. Showing that kind of affection after a breakup can reopen wounds, even if it temporarily smooths his own feelings. Madison says she was confused, and that makes complete sense, but she also has a voice here. If it felt confusing, it would have been important for her to name that with him. After a breakup, especially one you didn't want, any sign of affection can feel like hope, and it's incredibly easy to get pulled back in. Still, Madison's growth work is to explore why she stepped back into that moment so quickly and what she was hoping it meant. In this situation, she isn't acknowledging her own part in why the relationship was so challenging. So next, Madison is asked whether she got the closure she needed from Joe, and her response reveals exactly what her growth work looks like and what will truly help her move forward.
No, I don't. At this point, I've accepted that I'm not going to get a full sentence from Joe as far as what actually happened. So that's okay. I don't mean that as a diss. Truly, it's what I watched back was very frustrating to watch back.
When Madison says she doesn't expect a full sentence from Joe about what actually happened, that was a diss, despite her saying it wasn't. Comments like those are shaming. The deeper issue for Madison is that she is placing all of the responsibility for the breakup on Joe. I didn't hear her acknowledge what she contributed or what she regrets in her own behavior. And when you don't look at your part, you stay stuck. You repeat the same relational patterns, even with new partners. This isn't about saying she wasn't hurt. She clearly was. But when you're deeply hurt, it is very common to focus only on what the other person did and to overlook the ways your own actions, reactions, or choices play a role. Growth requires looking at both. This moment actually revealed Madison's growth work. Making a shaming comment and then insisting it wasn't a diss is a way of avoiding accountability. If Madison can become more curious about what drove her first to make that kind of comment and look at her own actions in the relationship and even what drew her to Joe. I mean, maybe she is choosing him based on what is familiar to her, based on her upbringing. I have no idea. But her growth work is to look at her part, gain self-awareness and personal insight so she doesn't repeat the same pattern where she will get hurt again. And that is how healing happens. Okay, let's talk a bit about Nick. In my previous video, I mentioned that his growth work was about becoming more authentic. So now the question is, did he actually grow? Let's see as he processes what happened with Kate.
I completely and utterly failed to take accountability for the breakup. I used faith to try to control the situation rather than just be in it and live in it. And I'm so sorry. It's something that I'm working on.
I'm not completely sure what Nick is implying he's working on. Is it taking accountability? Is it using faith to try to control a situation? Maybe both. I honestly don't know, but something does stand out to me. But let's watch a bit more before I say more.
And you're an amazing person. You didn't deserve that, and it's really clear I didn't deserve you. So
I think it was hard for me to accept that apology at the meetup because you could reach out to me and chat with me one-on-one anytime. And there was never any reach out just to chat one-on-one. It was on camera or after you heard I was gonna be here, he DM'd me to apologize. So I just felt like it still feels calculated. You know, if it was genuine, why not ask to talk to me off camera, one-on-one, no audience, you know?
For Kate, Nick's authenticity is still in question, and that's understandable. It's tricky when someone says all the right words, yet something still feels off. His words sound almost too perfect, almost rehearsed. I have no idea if they are or not, but remember what I always say, words and actions have to align for you to trust them, and Kate is naming exactly that. She is challenging his actions because to her, they are not lining up with what he is saying.
yeah, we chatted during the summer, and until it was played back, I thought that we did have closure. But watching that back was disassociative and jarring for me. Like seeing myself act like that was disgusting. And I apologize, but I didn't think I needed to apologize again. I thought that we had closure, and I didn't know that it felt shallow and calculated to you.
I realize it is incredibly hard to be vulnerable on TV. That being said, Nick's words do sound authentic when he says that watching himself back felt disassociative and jarring. So it's possible that he genuinely is trying to move toward more authenticity. But here's the piece that stands out. Nick has almost no affect. You don't feel emotion from him. You don't feel authentic remorse. You hear the right words, but you don't feel them. And that disconnect between what he says and what his emotional expression conveys is likely what feels jarring to both Kate and the viewers. People can say emotionally honest things, but without affect, it's hard to trust the meaning behind the words. That gap is an important part of Nick's growth work. This clip is what raises doubt for me regarding Nick's growth. Let's watch.
I felt butterflies in that moment, and I blurted it out too fast, and I wish I could have taken it back. But it was a very real feeling that I had towards you. I'm sorry, because I've never had the playbook on dating 2 women at once, and it was really wrong to say that when I still had another connection. And it was at your expense for me to then go on and choose my better connection for me. And I looked in the mirror that night, and I hated the person that I saw.
These are the exact same words he said to Kate when he first met her, word for word.
And I'm so sorry. I looked myself in the mirror that night, and I'm like, I hate this person right now because I was not honest with you about why I was breaking things off.
Now, it's possible he genuinely met them both times, but when you hear something repeated that precisely, that's when authenticity naturally comes into question. It starts to feel less like a spontaneous expression of emotion and more like a rehearsed line he pulls out in vulnerable moments. And that's exactly the kind of pattern that makes people doubt sincerity, even when the intention might be good. Okay, let's see if Annie grew since the show. She is asked about refusing to let Nick break things off with her. Let's see what she says.
I think I was chasing the feeling of being in the pods, of being so in love with somebody that I could picture my life ahead, that I wasn't quite willing to give that up. But watching this back, I can see myself forcing the entire relationship. And that's when it just starts to spiral. And we just continued to push it and force it, and I was willing to carry the burden up the mountain and make it work. And that's not the marriage I want.
That's actually a very self-aware and insightful answer from Annie. She recognizes that she was chasing the feeling of being in love like she felt in the pods. And while she doesn't say this directly, when she mentions not being ready to give up the life that she pictured in her head, she's talking about the hopes and dreams that she had built around her imagined future with Nick. I do think Annie still has some growth work to do. In my earlier video about Nick and Annie, I talked a lot about her strong need for reassurance, specifically the reassurance that she is loved. When your sense of security in a relationship depends heavily on external reassurance, it becomes easy to cling to the fantasy of what you hoped the relationship would be, even when the reality is telling a very different story. So while her insight here is meaningful, there is still some deeper work ahead for her around self-worth, emotional grounding, and learning to feel secure without constant validation from her partner. Okay, let's move on to KB and Edmond. And for this, I'm only going to focus on KB. If you're interested in a deeper dive into their relationship, I have 2 videos that you can watch. And the reason that I am narrowing in on KB here is because we're seeing a lot of the same patterns in the reunion with her, and I want to take a moment to address whether KB has experienced any personal growth.
Initially, like in the pods, everyone's like stating like, oh, you guys were trauma bonding and things. No, like he actually became my best friend in the pods. Crying in the pods for me didn't bother me. Like we're talking about things that we have never spoken about with anyone else. But when we got into the real world, it was the moments that he would cry. But I'm upset with you, I'm angry with you because you've done something, and instead of like being accountable, you cry, you drop to your knees and say, I just love you so much. That's when I started thinking, okay, this is manipulation.
What's missing here from KB is an acknowledgement of her strong need to feel wanted, a need that is likely connected to the abandonment that she experienced from her father, which she openly shared on the show.
Like everything is good when it comes to that. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm okay with him not being in my life anymore. I'm okay with never having that relationship again. But I don't know if I mean it.
She loved Edmond's enthusiasm in the pods because it met that exact longing. She may be aware of this trigger off camera, But what we saw on screen showed many moments where her reactions were tied directly to that father wound being activated. And to be clear, I am not suggesting Edmond didn't have his own challenges. I addressed all of those extensively in part 1 and 2 of my videos about them. But Kacie did exhibit harsh behavior toward Edmond.
Stop talking to me, bitch, because you're not letting me talk.
And even though she admits she shouldn't have reacted that way, she also, in a sense, justifies her behavior by labeling him as manipulative. And that leads to one of Kacie's biggest blind spots.
And I was like, okay, cool. But then he became kind of like a butthole. So the tears went away, but then he became like a butthole in a sense. And it was just like, okay, like, maybe I want the tears back.
She calls Edmond a butthole and then says this.
You did not deserve to be cussed at. You didn't deserve to be called a name. You did not deserve that. And I'm so sorry then, and I'm sorry a year and a half later watching it, I got so icky. And I'm so sorry about that.
There's a disconnect here. Kacie apologizes for name-calling and cussing at Edmond during their time together on the show, yet in the same conversation, she refers to him as a butthole. That's the exact pattern she's apologizing for. This is important because it shows that the behavior hasn't actually shifted. The language may have softened a bit, but the underlying impulse is still there. It's an example of acknowledging something intellectually without fully integrating the change emotionally or behaviorally. Kacie's growth work is to recognize how her harsh reactions toward Edmond were tied to the pain she still carries from her father. This doesn't mean her hurt or anger toward Edmond were not legitimate. They were. And at the same time, part of her healing will come from addressing that father wound. Breakups are not just endings. They are opportunities for reflections. And every reflection offers you a choice. Do I repeat this pattern or do I learn from it? As you watch these couples, notice what resonates with your own story, not with judgment, but with gentle curiosity. Because the truth is, relationships don't shape us by being easy. They shape us by revealing the exact places where our growth work is still unfolding. And if you're in a season of healing, please remember this. The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to become more honest with yourself, more aware of your patterns, and more compassionate towards the parts of you that are still learning. That's real transformation. Okay, that is a wrap for today. And next week, I will be releasing a video about the one thing people say all the time to me in therapy sessions that quietly blocks their healing. And I'm going to talk about how to finally move past it. It's powerful, and I can't wait to share it with you. See you soon.